Hello, everybody, and welcome to Motion Design Hotline, a program in which people sit around and try to answer your motion design problems. You're here with me, Evan Abrams. We've got Kyle Hamrick, as usual, and a special guest today. Right, today is Business Kyle. Kyle dressed up for it because we have a guest. We don't usually have guests on the program, but we're trying something new. Hayley, thank you for coming to join us. Hayley, you might know from founder of Motion Hatch, creator of the Motion Hatch Mastermind, and purveyor of one of the greatest contract bundles known to freelancing. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Yeah, thanks. This is going to be really fun, I can tell already.
We'll see. Folks, you don't know it, but we've been having some behind-the-scenes oopsies with some technical stuff, so if things drop out, just bear with us. It's because we're giving away all the business secrets, and people are trying to stop us from getting the word out today. That's where we're at. But hopefully everything remains normal. If you were around for last episode, the Catalina wine mixer that really blew up in our face several times, or maybe it didn't. Maybe I was just on edge the whole time. But the point is, bear with us. We are here to turn your motion design business questions into wisdom. So we're going to give it a whirl. We're going to try to get to those things. We have a few questions already in the queue, so we can have some things to talk about already. But let us know in the chat who you are, where you're from, what you do in motion design, and what ails you in your businesses. But
specifically in your businesses. Other stuff maybe for a different show.
Yeah, we can't give relationship advice. That's not something that we can get into. And one thing I'll say right off the jump, though, none of us are lawyers. We are not accountants. So we can give you opinion, we can give you advice, but we cannot give you qualified legal opinion. So with that caveat out of the way, Hayley, for those who don't know, I don't know who that is.
Oh.
Right on cue.
4:45 this time.
Okay. So Hayley, for those who don't know, tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us about the podcast, why you got started, all that good spiel.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and keep it short because I realize I keep going off. So anytime I could go off. So I want to keep it quick. So let's go for it. Right. So basically, I was doing freelance for a number of years before that, being a motion designer full time. And I felt like no one was really talking about, how to be a freelancer, what to charge, that kind of thing. And it felt like when I started freelancing, everyone was a bit kind of hush-hush about their rates and stuff. I don't know whether you both have felt the kind of same thing.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe it's changing, but there wasn't Facebook groups and all the stuff that we have now. So I just kind of started freelancing, and I would talk to a lot of my friends, and I would be saying hey, what are you charging? And then really, really good animators and motion designers would be charging less than me, and I'd be like, but you're really good, you should charge more and stuff like that, and it just felt like a lot of people were struggling with business stuff. And when I went freelance, because I was full-time for a lot of years, 7 years, I felt like I knew a bit about budgeting, the behind-the-scenes stuff and kind of what the producers did, just because of being around them for such a long time, I guess. And yeah, I just thought, when stuff happens, and basically I started hanging out with people who were, talking about, having a business as you travel around the world and stuff like that, the kind of digital nomad movement. And they had a membership that I joined. And I was like, someone should try and do this kind of stuff for motion designers. But you never think that it would be you who can do that, because you just think, well, no one wants to listen to me, talk about stuff. So, I met a guy who's now my podcast editor. And he said, you should start a
2 minutes.
See, I told you, it's a 2-minute window.
I know.
Big MoGraph is trying to stop us.
You should start a podcast.
You should start a podcast. Yeah, because I was saying that I wasn't very good at writing and stuff, being a creative. That's not one of my skills. So I thought that was kind of a scary idea. But somehow 3 months later, I had a podcast. And then it kind of all just happened from there, really, sort of just responding to what people were asking me and trying to help them more. And that's how I've kind of grown Motion Hatch.
Well, it's been fantastic. How many episodes are you up to now? Over 50? I saw
56 or something, I think.
56
coming out.
At the time
56 or 57 next week on Tuesday.
Awesome. And you have a lot of great guests on there, and there's a lot of great insight. So if you don't subscribe to that podcast, people, get on it. Get it in your feeds. Get it in your ears. You'll enjoy it. Because you have so many people on with various perspectives on business and promotion and all that stuff. So, we're here today. Kyle and I usually answer a lot of questions from people, but we don't have all the answers, which is why we've brought on, an expert who has a lot more experience. You've talked to way more people than we have in these fields. So, with that out of the way, how about we dive right on into some of our pre-prepared questions? Whoa, things are going to get crazy now. I'll read them as best I can from the folks who sent them in early. So Melanie from Virginia, USA, asked us on Twitter. She's from at Make Your Own Mark on Twitter. She writes, taxes. How much of your earnings do you typically leave aside for taxes? So, this is, of course, they're coming from America. You're in the UK. I'm in Canada. Kyle, you're also in America. So certainly there's a lot of perspective on these taxes, these hateful things. And it's coming up to the end of the year. So something people should think about. But Hayley, what do you think? What should people be doing? W/R/T taxes.
Yeah. So I think that.
Okay.
What was that one? Was that also 2 minutes?
Just about.
Oh.
So you basically just started. You said, I think.
Okay, yeah. So I think that what I keep hearing from people is around like 20 to 30% is usually good. But what we should say is, get an accountant. I think that's the best advice that I could probably give everyone. Like we were saying earlier, we're not accountants, we're not lawyers, blah, blah, blah. You should seek to have people in your business around you that are professionals in their area. And that's what I try and do with my business. And it's worked extremely well. So there's that side of it. And I want to hear about like what you guys think about that too. But also I've got a recommendation, a book that's fantastic called Profit First. Oh, I'm hitting my mic. Sorry. So yeah, Profit First by Mike Mccalla is an excellent book. You could basically probably read the first like chapter and know vaguely what he's talking about. So what it does, because as freelancers, we kind of do bank balance accounting. So we just look at our bank balance, our business bank account and go, yeah, I've got money. And then it comes to like the tax like deadline. Then we're like, oh, I don't have enough money for tax, So what he says to do in Profit First is, as the name says, like you take your profit out first, and it's all based on percentages. So the different things that you split up are, I'm going to give like a super broad overview of this because, it can get a little bit complicated. So you take a percentage for your profit, a percentage for your tax, a percentage for your operating expenses, and a percentage for like owner's compensation, which would be like what you pay yourself out of. And then you have like a pot for income as well. And what he suggests is you actually have different bank accounts for these things. So, it's quite like you have to have like an account for each thing. And I know like in some countries it's a little bit difficult to do that, but I managed to get an app. It's like a tied business account and you can have 4 in there. So I've got 4 accounts in there. And then I've got a coconut one, which is another.
Yep. We're pretty consistently at 2 minutes now.
It's 2 minutes. Oh, interesting. So about this coconut account.
I'm going to start giving you a 2-minute warning because it's been consistent now.
It's true. So you were talking about these multiple accounts. Yeah, I can hear you.
Well, we can anyway.
Okay, fine. I'll carry on.
Okay, now we're back.
Yeah, so the coconut account is like a UK-based like app accounting thing too. So I bring all my income through the coconut account, and then based on percentages, I put it into the different kind of 4 other accounts, and that's just helped so much. Like just looking at those different bank accounts, because then you look at your expenses and you go, oh, I haven't got enough money in expenses to do this thing. And like really, you might have like a lot more money, but you're actually running your business in the way that you should run a business, rather than just like looking at the whole number, if that makes sense.
And I think that's a very important point. Like you need to keep in mind, even if you're just one person, you are a business and you need to run it as such. Like at the very least, have a separate bank account for your business entity, like set up a business entity that has its own bank account, and then you get paid, like personal Kyle gets paid from business Kyle, and it helps keep everything straight. And your accountant will definitely recommend that you do stuff like that. Depending on where you are, it helps establish some like a little bit of legal protections as well. Makes you more legitimate. A lot of benefits there.
Yeah, I mean, So for me in Canada, our tax laws, you get taxed quite a lot. So basically, every time I get paid, I take 35% of that and I push it into a bin that I will not be touching because that money will be going to somebody else, right? So that I don't.
Hopefully a bank account, not an actual bin.
No, it's
That
a
would be
giant
wise.
thing under my mattress. I stuff all the cash into that. It earns no interest. It's an abysmal idea. I only convert my winnings into gold, people. What you call terrible. No, I there's an amount of investment, TFSAs, those kinds of tax-free holding entities that are fairly useful. I don't like to tip my hand, but I'm fairly robust in my financial arrangements. But it's I don't know. And now my bank is kicking Hayley.
Yeah.
The trouble is
2 minutes, right? All right on the button.
Right on the dot. Oh man. This is a live show told in 2-minute increments.
Yeah, it's really strange, isn't it? Because like it's so regular, so how it couldn't be like the internet or something. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. But hopefully that helps Melanie out with her tax woes. I think the big takeaways are enlist the help of an accountant. At the very least, have accounting software and have a separate bank account. These are the things.
And, not to go on too much of a tangent, but something you said that a lot of self-employed people probably don't think about is do have some kind of investing or some kind of retirement plan. Like, we have no retirement plan as self-employed people. At least here in the US, I assume it's the case there. So like, that's a thing that you need to think about doing yourself.
Yeah. And like the earlier, the better too. Yeah. Like early 20s, go for it. I didn't do this, but I'm saying other people should do.
Same.
Well, I am a lame person. I've been investing for retirement since I was 10.
Oh God.
That's why Evan's having yacht parties while we're like.
Yes. Good. Awesome. So if anyone else has questions about taxes, though, you let us know in the chat. But guys, I think let's get into the weeds. Let's get crazy here. This one is
like,
more...
what are you going to say next? Exciting. Sorry.
Really bring the drama. So this one is... this one comes to us from Twitter, from Anastasia in Austin, Texas. Hayley, this one's directed at you. Hayley, what is your take on an independent contractor agreeing to clauses like this? And I'm quoting here. For a period of 3 years... After project completion, the independent contractor will not directly or indirectly solicit business from... I'll continue when she's back.
Right at 2 minutes again.
Man.
Yeah.
You should have just carried on because I can see the questions.
So. No, I'll continue.
I'm part of the illusion, Hayley.
That's right.
All right. Sorry. Sorry, everyone who's watching.
Solicit business from or provide the same or similar service to any current client of company, something we often call a non-compete clause. What do you think? Is this something that you've seen? Because you've had maybe more exposure to contracts. You have that wonderful contract bundle. Is this common? Should people be agreeing to this?
So I think this is more common in the US, I think, because I haven't seen it as much or definitely not as kind of strict in the UK. Because people, seem to like to sue each other in the US more, apparently. But
it's a natural pastime.
That's not like an official thing, but it seems that way. So I think that what I have seen a bit is if you work with, say a recruiter or something, like sometimes they'll say up to a year after you kind of leave them or the contract is up, then you can't work with any of those clients. But that's mostly what I've seen in the UK. I think 3 years to me seems a bit OTT, but I mean, maybe you guys can touch a bit more on it because I think it's very different in different countries too.
Yeah, I've seen this clause a lot more when I used to work in advertising because I was at an agency. They were like, well, because you have all these contacts, we don't want you basically taking your Rolodex and stealing all of the clients from this core business, right? Mm-hmm. And that was the main idea behind the non-compete clause. What an insane fear, I suppose, but people are more mercenary and they might do that all the time. Like, if the entity is a production company, a freelancer could certainly set up their own team and start servicing those clients directly. It's a real fear And the trouble is that mostly it's just there to sort of complicate. Oh, you nailed it! 2 minutes on the dot.
Yep.
Totally and 2 minutes again. We're nailing it, guys. We got to keep
I'll stop talking about it, but we've got it down to a science now.
Exactly. So, for me, that's usually where I see it the most, is in advertising circles and in areas where there is a fear that the individual entity will take something from the larger one. That being said, even though that clause existed in a lot of contracts, people still did it all the time, because to go after and sue a lot of people is actually quite costly. So in Canada, we have this rule that if you lose the lawsuit, you usually end up paying for it. So if you mount a lot of losing cases, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
I do think the way this specific one is written, I think is relatively reasonable, because it does make a point of saying that it's a current client of the company. And 3 years is kind of a long time, but like, that's legitimate, because they do want to protect themselves from people just poaching clients. I've definitely seen ones, and like was presented with ones in the past where it basically tried to outlaw you. Well, not outlaw, but prevent you from like working with any similar, like doing any similar business within a certain geographical area. And that's where it's way, way over the line, because you're effectively signing away your ability to do your job at that point. So, obviously, like at a certain point, you do need lawyers to help you parse this and how enforceable it is, which sucks. But especially if you're like signing this as part of a full-time job that you're looking at. But I think the biggest point is just be mindful about what you are signing and what you're agreeing to, and know that you don't necessarily have to agree to everything just because someone hands it to you in a contract. You can negotiate that and make it work in your favor as well.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like,
perfect.
That's right. Interrupting gets people booted. But I was gonna say that the idea that when someone's asking you to sign a legal document, if you don't understand it, there are experts you should consult for that.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. No. Definitely.
Oh, it's so in sync here.
And we just had a question in the chat about how enforceable these are. And at least in the US, I know the crappy answer is it depends on what state you're in. So like consult a lawyer is really the best answer. It kind of depends on how vindictive the people with giving you the contract are too.
Well, it's interesting. Alicia's talking about in the chat. Alicia, good luck hanging out in the chat with us. She's asking or just talking about the idea of giving away IP, even like that any intellectual property you create for that company is not yours, it's theirs. Is that, I don't know, like in the UK, is that a more common thing that you may find in contracts? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah, like, so in the UK, I think it is very much the same on that front, where it's usually if you're working for like a production company or like an agency in-house, something like that, you would probably be expected to give them the intellectual property. But at the end of the day, this is why we should have contracts, because you need to know whether you're doing that or not. And you as the artist should be assigning that to your client. Does that make sense? Like, at least in the UK, that's definitely the case. And because obviously, like, I have the contract bundle in the US as well, like I have a bit of a more of overview of that, even though I'm not living in the US. But I think it's still the same there. But so you need to like know this. So it's fine if like the client's giving you a contract, it's fine. You just need to know that you understand it. And if you don't, you should go and ask a lawyer, because like, and it seems scary, and it might be like, you have to kind of weigh it on project by project. How much is this worth? Like, how much money are you getting from this contract? Like, is it?
That's the 2-minute warning.
Yep. How much is it?
Yeah, like, this is what we have to think about, I think, because I don't think we can just say like, okay, every contract that you like don't understand, or you should just ask the client first as well if you don't understand it, because they should understand it and they should be able to at least explain it a bit better to you. And then if you're still not 100%, I think that you should go like just ask a lawyer. It's not as expensive as people think it is. Like, I've been dealing with a UK solicitor, so that's who we would go and see. So it's like a type of lawyer or whatever. And then like we just don't call them the same thing. And then so
They wear wigs, right?
No, that's like a barrister or something, isn't it?
Yeah,
we call them different types of lawyers, basically.
Okay.
I'm not the expert on lawyers. I don't know. But anyway, and then in the US, you should go and speak to a lawyer because it is expensive sometimes and stuff, but they'll tell you, like, they're not going to just give you a bill straight away. They'll be like, okay, if they're going to charge you for their time, they'll say, hey, my hourly rate is this. I'm going to look at this. It's going to take me 4 hours. So then your bill is going to be this. They should do that. And if they don't do that, then they're not a good lawyer, in my opinion. So, yeah, like, I think we just have to get more used to thinking of us, having our businesses and like thinking we're running a business and that kind of stuff. And it's like what I was saying, not every project is going to be worth you doing this.
Right.
Does that make sense? So You've got to think like, am I the animator who's creating all the characters, all the illustrations? I'm doing it from home. I'm doing it on my own machines. This is my style. And this direct client wants to use it for their brand. They might want to use it on like their website and stuff as well. Then you need to be looking more at intellectual property and stuff like that. Compared to I'm just going to go and sit in someone's agency and just.
Now, what Kyle doesn't know is he's being very offensive to people in the UK with this hand sign.
I am, actually. I just realized that.
Kyle's 2-minute warning is the most vulgar thing he's ever done to the UK audience.
Is
Why?
it UK
What did
or
he
just
say?
Australia?
Oh, maybe it's only Australia that he does that.
I'm doing this to give you a 2-minute warning.
Yeah, I don't
bad
know
for you?
whether that's good. Yeah.
Maybe just turn your hand around.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't see that. I was just talking.
No.
So yeah, I was just saying compared to being in an agency, kind of just being like a After Effects monkey button pusher kind of thing, then like you're probably not going to have something where you can say, hey, this is my IP. Like if you're not doing all the design and stuff, it's just kind of, we just need to think about this sensibly, and you can't say this rule applies to every single contract and every single client because that's just not the case. This is what I've learned. But I think that we need to get more used to contracts and either ourselves having one that we give to our clients or they give one to us, but we make sure we understand it. And either way is fine, I think, but just more of that would be good.
Perfect.
I think a good general takeaway too, that is a thing that I think people like us generally are maybe not good at, is think about, spending hundreds of dollars right now to prevent yourself losing thousands of dollars later when you get tied up in one of these legal conundrums.
Yeah, those are woes, and they don't teach you about it in art school.
Yeah, and can I just say one more thing about that?
Please.
Is I know that people are always saying like, oh yeah, but we're not going to enforce a contract and all that stuff, and maybe you aren't, right? Maybe it's not worth it to like chase after some client with a contract about something or other. But what it does do, having a contract, it makes the client really clear about how you work and how you like to work and what they're going to get from you and all of this stuff up front. So there's less of like you upsetting them or them upsetting you later down the line, if that makes sense.
I mean, to borrow a phrase from therapy, it's setting boundaries. We're setting boundaries for ourselves and boundaries for the client. That's it's going to render the ambiguous into something that we can all understand about it. Good. So let's move on to another one of these pre-questions. I don't want to leave too many of them behind. I know our queue is filling up with good ones. Also, we're getting them. It's coming into the pile. This one maybe a little bit wackier. This is from Joe Petrell. He asked it before like a week ago. This one's been sitting in the queue the longest. He asked maybe the most difficult of the questions. How do you know what your work is worth as a freelancer? It's kind of a nebulous thing to get into. I'd love to know your thoughts, Hayley. How do we know what our work is worth?
So, like, I think the easy way to look at it is like, what are the clients willing to pay for your work? And that's not saying that you should just like accept that. I'm just saying like literally is like how much can you get from that? And, I think it's like our job to try and figure out what that is, and ways to do that, because pricing is really difficult, is, if you've got a day rate, which is kind of what most of us are using, is what I used to like to do is have to give myself some negotiating room, and also to test the clients to see like how far like up and down they would go on the kind of scale, is, you know, have like what I wanted sort of in the middle, and then have like a number that I thought was like a little bit too high, and then have like my lowest I would go. Does that sort of make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So like I would always say like the higher number, because everyone's probably thinking a higher number than you're thinking, right? So we should just start high. And then if they say, oh, no, we can't do that, then that's good. And then you say, okay, cool, what about this number? And then you kind of go down towards your middle number that you really want.
Kyle's doing
Wait for
Is
it.
it gonna go?
Yep.
Oh, you called it. Kyle, you nailed it again. Top prize to Kyle.
That was good. And then the lower number would be like, I'm not going to go below this number, no matter what they say or anything like that. And then because you've got those three numbers in your mind, it makes it really, really easy to negotiate. And also, you know, it makes it easy to see, to kind of push yourself up a bit with what you think that you can charge. And then, you know, if a client says yes straight away to what you said, then you're probably not charging enough, because you could probably challenge them a little bit more on that, I'd say. And with like project fee stuff, what I've done before is like throw out like a range and always say higher than you think as well. So throw out kind of high range, like quite a broad numbers, and see like kind of their reaction and sort of gauge it on that. Or obviously you could try and ask them the budget, but in my experience, that doesn't, you know, you normally have to show them some sort of numbers, like, oh, this kind of animation would usually take, you know, cost between this and this, or people always sometimes use like anchoring, so they would give like 3 prices for 3 different levels of animation as well.
And it's interesting. So there are a lot of like ways, right? So if this is like a market driven pricing, right? You're going to test the market, you can see what happens, right? There is, if you want to work it backwards, right, to figure out like what is that minimum number, right? That's maybe the hardest place to arrive. And I saw some people were asking kind of in the chat just now about, you know, how do I compute a day rate? How do I do that kind of thing? I know there's a few calculators out there on the internet, but the big thing is figuring out what is the minimum amount of money you need to make to live. That's part of it, right? To survive. And then you're going to have your operating expenses on top of that. Okay, so we need to meet that number. We should probably derive some kind of profit from our business enterprise, so we're going to add that on. And then we can figure out how many days we actually want to work for the whole year. All of that calculation goes into figuring out what your day rate is. And the other, one of the kind of less satisfying parts of that is this idea that it's all kind of subjective, right? That it's depending on your locality. If you live in London, it costs you more to live than the person who's living in the suburbs of Ottawa, right? That's just part of life. Or I don't know what the cost of living is like in Kansas City, but I'm going to imagine exorbitant. They are called the Royals, Kyle. And so like your locality is going to determine a lot of these factors. The actual cost to survive is going to deal with these things. You know, I lived in the Caribbean for a while where a single dollar goes 3 times as far, right? So you don't have to earn as much to live. So you can either adjust to that locality. And anyway, that will sort of get you to your minimum point, right? But you shouldn't live at your minimum point. I don't think anyone gets into an entrepreneurial enterprise to earn the minimum they possibly can. Anyway, yeah. But I mean, so Kyle, you've worked in a few different business functions as well. Like you've been part of like a partnership, sort of an agency format. Like there are many ways to structure a business. So if we could, I'd love to talk a little bit about, if we can, about kind of the varying ways you might price yourself, because we talked about day rates. People are also asking about per project rate as well. So, you know, is there any advice on that front, Hayley? While we're on the topic of pricing, I guess.
It depends what you mean. Like, because I feel like, you know, trying to have, I think some things that I've talked about in my mastermind groups before are things like having, if you're dealing with direct clients, sometimes you need things like a capabilities doc. So you would say like, these are the past projects that we've done or that I've done. And this is kind of like the range of the price for each one. That sometimes is really helpful for.
Kyle, it's like you're flipping people off.
I'm kind of just doing this to amuse myself at this point because I like being able to predict it so accurately.
This is how we get banned from YouTube. All right. So yeah, you were talking about this capabilities document, kind of like a menu, so people can choose and understand the different ranges and what they'll get for their different ranges of funding, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, I don't know, I feel like saying it's a menu makes it sound bad, but like I've seen, like, you know, like production companies have done this. I've done it before. Like, people do this quite often. It just helps the clients understand, like, you know, what kind of animations you can do for them, you know, because obviously we all know, like, doing a character animation is going to take usually much longer than doing something with text, for example. So kind of giving those different options, I feel like, can be really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's all about clarity, right? That the client doesn't know what they're going to spend. Maybe they have a budget in mind. Maybe they don't know what things even cost. You know, the onus is on us to educate them.
Especially if you're direct to client, I think that's probably, you know, common. You're probably doing a lot of that educating of your client versus, you know, if you're someone who is going and sitting, you know, in a studio every day, you probably don't have to worry about any of that. And those are both, you know, freelancers. So it really depends on your context a lot.
Guys, we're gonna have an amazing segue right here. Check this segue out. Corey Bremmel from Vancouver, British Columbia asks, what is the best way for a motion designer to convince a potential client of the return on investment of paying for top-notch motion design when there's so many options and a lot of underbidding going on? So how do we show this value? How do we communicate this value?
One of us should talk for about 10 more seconds because otherwise it's just going to be disruptive.
Because it's going to be disruptive. Well, we are seeing a lot of people in the chat talk about case studies. They're talking about this idea of showing process and then putting a price tag to those. Boop.
Yeah, there's anyway, I'll toss it to Hayley.
Yeah, so I think, like, what you were saying, Kyle, about the education, like, that's a big part of it, especially direct to client. So, you know, when you're talking about, like, return on investment and stuff, I think that usually says direct to client to me. Like, normally, otherwise we wouldn't really be having these sort of conversations. So things like to portray the value is, like, you know, showing your behind the scenes, stuff like that, like to show, you know, what you're doing and kind of like how hard we work, doing case studies, maybe like putting stats on case studies, like how many YouTube views did this get for your other client? Like, you know, like how many sales did they get from a launch where they did this? You know, motion designers are quite scared about talking about this kind of business stuff. Like, you know, going to your client and saying, like, what are you looking to get out of this animation? Like, why are you doing an animation? You know, and then if you think they're doing it for the wrong reasons or it's not the thing that's actually going to move their business forward, then you should tell them that because they'll respect you more. And then they might come back to you when they actually have a valid animation project too.
That's very interesting. I had this exact conversation with a company. They were talking about, like, oh, we want to do like a 2-minute thing and then we want to put it out on all of our social media channels. Like, right. We're going to make one thing and you're going to use it once? What is that? What do you mean? You know, like, what you really need is like 10 or 20 things every month to put out on your Instagram if that's the channel you intend to build. And then how do we actually create either templates or small pieces that you can remix and restructure based on your messaging that will change throughout the year? Like, it was an interesting thing that they had glommed onto this idea that I want this long video, but that is not necessarily serving their needs. And granted, it's not always our job to be a business analyst for them, right? You know, their marketing department has already made a choice based on their best information, right? And, you know, maybe we support that, maybe we don't, but ultimately, you know, we're here to design, I think, as best we can with whatever directives people want to go with. But it's interesting. I love that idea of having frank discussion about the purpose, right? The purpose of a piece, which I think is often lost because we're more concerned with the aesthetics of a piece. You know,
I think a lot of times people just get hyped on making something cool and maybe they aren't thinking about why they really need it. And even if you're just asking them some of those questions, it might help them like hone the purpose of the project more. And I've definitely worked on things where the client realized halfway through they didn't really want or need this thing, and no one ends up being happy with it at the end because
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you're showing your value there if you can have those types of conversations as well. There's a book that I've just got when we went off. I haven't read all of this, but what I have read was very good. So it's called Creative Strategy and the Business of Design by Douglas Davis. So
Wonderful.
maybe check that one out too.
So many good book plugs. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's great. I love that phrase you used, of phrasing this around value, right? Of finding the value, of communicating the value. Something that I think is often overlooked when trying to discuss what we're going to do. Getting hung up on style and all this stuff, but bringing it back to value in a business context, because that's what people want. They want to know that they're getting something of value. Well, that's all of our pre-questions. We've got through them all, and it only took almost half the episode. But we've got a bunch that have been coming in. We've been saving them all in our large pile here. Kyle, why don't you reach into our big pile here, rummage around, and reach in and grab one, and we'll see what Kyle pulls out of the question bin.
I've been kind of trying to keep track of ones that are pretty overlappy. And did we just lose Hayley, or did she just come back?
No, Hayley's back.
Yeah.
So here's one that I think is kind of related to what we were talking about, maybe a nice like follow-up. So Andrew asked, as far as contracts go, are they necessary all the time? For example, if you have, say, an old familiar client, you're just now starting to use contracts. Do you insist they sign one from now on? Is it per project?
So,
I think, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
do you want me to go?
Yeah.
So I was going to say about this one, I think that you should say, hey, I'm trying to, make my business better, make it better for you guys and more streamlined, and kind of put systems in place. So I've got these new contracts, like, would you mind taking a look at them, and just kind of go from there. I think it's about being just be nice and casual about these things. You don't have to be like, you must sign the contract now, and just see what they say and just have that conversation. If they're familiar with you and if they like you, they'll probably be pretty open to it, I think.
I think it's an interesting thing. Like, I've worked with this person for so long. Maybe we don't need a contract, right? I'm nervous to bring it up because maybe that'll change our relationship by formalizing it. I don't really want to put a ring on it because maybe they say no. These kinds of ideas. It's like, what I do? I blame my insurance company. I have to get contracts because my insurance company says so. Sorry, it's out of my hands. That's
a good tactic too.
That's just, my hands are tied. I got new insurance on the place, and they say I got to have contracts. If I want to keep my CGL insurance, it's what we got to do. So let's sign some. I
was just going to say, it doesn't matter if they have already given you a contract. If you've got a contract with them already, that's fine. Like we were saying earlier, you just got to understand it. Just make sure that you understand the.
Darn it. It was a little early, I think. I missed the last break.
Oh, no. And we're back. So, yeah, I love that. Like, the idea of understanding, even if you've worked with them forever, let's just formalize it. It's fine. It'll be cool.
It's probably good to have something in writing, and that can just be an email, too, that clarifies, like, let's say you've done 50 projects with this client. You don't need a 4-page stuffy legal document every time. But make sure, don't just be like, hey, can you want to do this thing? Sure. Okay. Like, figure out, what's the budget for this one? What's the timeline for this one? Like, formalize things at least enough. So I think sometimes it is easy to be relaxed with a familiar client like that. But sometimes that's where it ends up going off the rails, because you might feel, pressured to just let it slide or whatever. And maybe they just hired a new creative director who suddenly takes everything way out of scope. And now you're kind of stuck because you didn't bother to formalize things, right?
Yeah. And so there's a few things I want to say. Just reiterate again that we are not lawyers. This isn't legal advice, and it's just for educational purposes only. We're just like saying our opinion and stuff that we've learned from other people and stuff like that. So, but also like what we have in the freelance contract bundle, because of this, because like when you have like a regular client, you don't want to be like giving them a thing every time, unless it's like for a project fee and you are like defining the scope of work and stuff like that, then you do, because you need to give them a scope of work. But if it's more like an agency, we have like terms of service, which you would give them once, they would sign once, and then you kind of just put this like little slip on the end of the email. And really, like, maybe you don't need to do that, maybe you do, but you kind of got to use your own thing, but at least have them like sign a thing once, if that makes sense. But yeah, just want to reiterate, not legal advice, not a lawyer. If you've got really, really big questions about this stuff. Yeah. I've just learned from doing podcasts with like quite a few lawyers and solicitors. They always make sure.
Perfect. We always cut off our disclaimers. We don't we don't want to have the full disclaimer.
Yeah, just like 80% of a disclaimer.
That's perfect. That's how we do it. Awesome. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Let's go on to some other ones that are on here. We've got Sam Cat of Bear Studios. Always good to see him in the chat. He's saying, I've found recently that owning my own business while trying to hunt for something more permanent has been a real negative point. They've been turned away from jobs because of it. Do we have any advice? Hayley, do you have any advice for people who kind of have a side business but still want to get employed places?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, like I've not had this question before. That's really interesting. Like, so I kind of would like to know a bit more about the side business, and also like why they're telling their clients that they have a side business. Do they need to do that kind of thing?
I can tell you a bit about Sam's side business. He makes really interesting plugins that he sells digitally, and it does take an amount of development time and stuff like that. It may be kind of a conflict that they're thinking about, like, oh, if you're going to split your time between our job and your other job, then we want you all to ourselves for 16 hours a day. Meh. Maybe that's their attitudes, but I don't know. Yeah. It's interesting because personally, if someone has initiative and drive to pursue things, I think that makes them more of an asset, and they bring varying skills. But I can see a more jealous, monogamous style business entity demanding that, if that makes sense. I don't know. Like, maybe this comes down to what you put on your CV, right? Like, what do you include? What do you exclude? We could maybe any thoughts on that kind of thing for folks who are going out to try to land jobs.
I'm going to take this from Hayley because she's going to disappear in a second. I think that it depends a little bit too. This kind of loops back to the non-compete question that we were talking about before, because I think some people get a little nervous that you are going to be, potentially stealing work or clients from them, which is not necessarily the case. But I think some people don't understand. It's probably just kind of a control thing for some people, but really, like, what you do outside work hours, as long as it's not impacting your work, should really be none of their business, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think as well, like, I would think about, do you want to work for someone who doesn't see the value in you having like extra kind of stuff that you do in the industry and stuff like that? Surely that should make you more valuable, than less. Like Evan was saying, I would see that as like almost like an asset to the company. Like, you can bring something else. You have this other experience that maybe we don't have, and we could maybe play on that a little bit or something like that.
Yeah. And for those of you out there, Sam is a designer. He's a coder. He's a cool dude. So, get him on your team if you can. So, awesome. What else we got going on here? We've got questions about cold emails. We've got
revisions pricing is kind of related to some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Okay. What's that question, Kyle? What's that one?
So Andrew said, I'd love to know how to price out revisions, how many revisions you allow before considering a new project, which is a nice follow-up to that, which again, kind of goes to, laying out these terms before you start, right? So that you're not figuring it out retroactively right off the top. If you're like 2 revisions and then, it costs X amount per hour, might be a good strategy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's why you have to have contracts and stuff. Otherwise, how would anyone know, like, how many revisions they're getting? Like, what's the project fee? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of those revisions.
Those revisions. Can we revise our stream health?
Maybe.
I feel like it's my fault because I'm just going off, but I don't know.
No.
I have some thoughts, but we'll get to it after because this one we gotta
Okay.
stick to the business.
Okay, so what was I saying? Revisions. So I've seen like normally like 3 revisions is fine, but like sometimes what I think is a good thing to do is work in revisions like as you go. So you'd have revisions on the storyboard, revisions on the style frames, revisions on the animatic. I was trying to think what comes after that next. And then like by the time you get to doing an animation bit, you should have like hardly any revisions. And maybe there's like a couple just tiny bits at the end, but you kind of say like, after this point, after the storyboard, we've signed the storyboard off, then we move on to the next bit. You can't change that. You can't go back. It's this thing of like animation is like a waterfall and less like kind of agile working.
Well, it's interesting, like as working from broader scope to more narrow, there's less surprises. People are checking it at every level. Oftentimes I hear this thing. This is something that I hear from folks all the time: is that we don't have time to do all this pre-production stuff. And like, oh, really? But you have time to redo a project after you get to the end of it, right? Which of those do you have the time for? And since time equates almost immediately to billings, then those are things to think about. What's interesting and something that I really like about good contracts is that it defines what a revision means. Is that a change in scope? Is that a change in just superficial details? Like what is revision and how much can that consume? And when we're so far down the process, can we change things that were fundamentally agreed to before? Those are the kinds of relationship thoughts that you want to have in place to avoid troubles. Anyway.
Alicia had a good tip in the chat here. She says, when sending in previews, always put a suffix at the end of the file name, like version 1, etc. This helps the client be more cognizant of making decisions decisively. And she got that from the future.
Oh,
nice. I like
without
that.
the E, to clarify. She's not a time traveler.
Yeah, that would be good. I think that's a really good one. And 2, it's about like telling the client what you want feedback on as well. Like when you're doing the storyboard and stuff like that, and you're doing the style frames, saying like, this is what we're looking for feedback now in the style frames on the character design or whatever, kind of directing them a little bit.
Yeah, and so I use a service called Whipster. Shout out to Whipster out there. It's similar to like Frame.io and these kinds of things where you can send a thing and they can give notes right on the frame, and you can update that file so they know, all right, this is version 1, this one's version 2, this one's version 3, and instead of sending it for review, you say, oh, I'm going to send this for approval, right? We're not in reviewing anymore, we're in approval time now. And just those kinds of
psychological difference.
Right. It's a hard limit on, well, we have now passed a certain Rubicon and we will not be returning unless you're willing to alter the terms of our agreement. Cool.
It's a good the waterfall analogy, which I think I probably got from Andrew's episode of your podcast, right?
Right. I can't remember.
I think, but I definitely use the same flow where, after this point, we are not making changes to this aspect of it anymore. We'll be working on this now. You do script and then storyboard and whatever. And if you have major changes, and this will kind of address a question that we got in here too, like, major changes to any of this previous stuff after that point, like you're looking at, maybe some significant charges, because then you're going back up the waterfall and you are, fixing it. But in theory, if you get people to sign off at each point, and I think maybe a good thing to say too is make sure that the person who can make those decisions is signing off on those. So you're not getting the person down here saying, oh yeah, it's fine. And then it turns out this is the person that needs to approve the thing and they don't see it to the end. That's not ideal.
Yeah, that's where like Whipster helps as well, because they can kind of like you can send it to their team and they can collect their feedback on it, so they can like comment underneath each other's comments and all that kind of stuff. I think it's good.
And maybe as a follow-up to that, Andrew is asking, is there a good resource for the waterfall method? Well, of course, listen to Motion Hatch podcasts. Waterfall methodology comes from software development, so there's actually a lot of resources dedicated to how it works and that kind of thing. I was in Ukraine giving a talk on this very thing, which maybe I can find those little PowerPoints and throw them up somewhere. But hopefully.
Yeah, we should do something on that. Like, it's pretty straightforward, like a PDF or something. But I think if you just search like waterfall versus agile and stuff like that, will come up.
Or Scrum. Who wants to get into a Scrum?
Oh, Scrum, that's it. Yeah, that one.
Some things work for software that do not work for animation.
Kind of going on this thread here, but so Nick Canton just said, ugh, I've had where everything's approved and almost done, then the CEO sees it, had something entirely different in mind. And I mean, yeah, that happens. The point is, like, that can happen. But if up front you've clarified, like, if that happens, then you're going to be adding X dollars and X time because maybe I have another project lined up directly after that. And like, if you are making those decisions, it's going to affect your deadline and your budget.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, it looks like Nick got paid for 2 videos, so good for him.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Nick.
That's how it works.
All right, Kyle, let's dive into this bag so that when Hayley's feed comes back, we can...
I kind of like this one. I mean, I don't know if we're going to have good answers for it, but...
Well, let's find out.
Yeah.
So this is from Sahor from India. Hi, lots of love from India. Well, lots of love to India. We love getting everyone out there who's tuning into the show and learning lots. Here's the question. How can I charge clients who cannot afford my prices? Ooh, but also I want to work with them because the project seems very cool. So this is one of those things where maybe there's a certain amount of cachet to a brand, or to maybe it's like a friend's business as well. They're making cool sneakers. What can we make for them? Is there maybe something in exchange, something beyond money they can compensate? I don't know. Are there any... Certainly, as capitalist-minded people, cash is great. But is there anything, Hayley, that certainly I would never advocate someone work for exposure, and I don't think you do either. But
No.
Are there other non-tangibles that are worth exploring?
Yeah, I think this is super tricky. This is like a really tricky one because, like we were saying before, it kind of depends on like the projects and the clients and stuff like that. And this is where like the kind of having a range of a rate helps, because maybe you're going to like your lower range, but that's fine because it's not past like your minimum, if that makes sense. And I think that Jessica Heish has a really good like interactive thing where it's like, should I work for free? But you could change that in your mind to be like cheap.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. Free, cheap, it's kind of like the same in a way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
if you're losing money per hour, it might as well be free.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're, you have the potential to work on another project, but you're working on this, then, so it's good to have a look at that. Maybe we can I don't know whether we can link it somewhere or something, but
we have show notes. We have show notes for this stuff. We can
I know what you're talking about, and I will put it in the show notes, and I'll probably grab it and drop it in the chat in just a second here.
Okay, cool. Kyle's on with the links.
Yeah, so it's just really good because you can just go through and click it through it, and it says like, is this like a family member? Is this this person? Is this that? And then it kind of tells you the answer each time, and I really like that. And because there's no really good way to answer it unless you know like all the project facts and blah blah blah.
We were having an interesting discussion. This when I was in Ukraine. I was talking to a guy that works at Pentagram in New York, and we were talking about how declining budgets and all these things affect everybody. And we were talking about like, well, isn't design often the idea that we're going to use an amount of skill to maybe do more with less? Is there a way to conceive of a project that doesn't take 40 hours, that instead we can actually do and render good service in 10 hours, right? Is there a way we can minimize labor and minimize effort to a point where we're still achieving the goals, bringing it back to why they want to get the thing done in the first place? Can we achieve the goals with what we have, with what budget you have? In those instances, I find it really helpful to get people to just be upfront about, well, how much money do you have? What is the absolute amount you can spend on this initiative. And for some people, it's quite low because they just don't have that, right? And it's like, okay, well, here's what we can do. I can produce some templates, and then you can go shoot things on your phone and put it on your Instagram, right? Maybe that is what we do to achieve your goals. You know, it'll take me 10 hours to do, and we'll be done, and we can do something with it. Or, you know, it's about being more creative and less brute force to get people where they want to go, you know, and granted, you're not going to earn a lot from these jobs, but hopefully that service will render and help them. I often think about, you know, people whose friends' businesses maybe need some help, you know, those kinds of areas where there's an emotional baggage to saying no, right? That kind of like, well, my aunt has a sweater shop, and so we need to do something on Etsy for her or whatever, you know, but you know, because there's more to it than the financial thing. It's like, well, why didn't you help your aunt out? You know, granted, my aunt works in PR. She would never ask me for anything. That would never happen.
I think an important point here is that, especially with projects that are quote cool, I think a lot of times those companies know that. And whether they're intentionally doing it or not, they tend to be exploitive of people like us who can do things. Just this morning on Twitter, I saw the next James Bond movie.
Kyle, there's no time for your hot takes.
Poster contest. They probably spent, you know, tens of thousands of dollars shooting the 20-second promo to put on Twitter to ask people to submit designs, right? Like, be aware that obviously, you know, if it's a new company or something like that, maybe they legitimately don't have that money, but be aware of what your skills are worth and don't give them away just because something sounds cool. Like, you could probably do a cool personal project that would be a lot more valuable to you than working for exposure for someone else's thing, right?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because when it comes to like small companies or startup companies, there's seed capital, there's investment. Like, that's part of the marketing plan and marketing budget. So just because something is small and new doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be low cost, right?
Yeah,
that it's those kinds of things. Man, that was some of the best acting I've ever seen Daniel Craig do, though. But you know.
I didn't even watch it. I just rolled my eyes at it, and I was really disappointed that he was even involved. That made me
angry. But he had to act for the exposure to be in it. He has to.
There you go. Yeah, I'm sure he did it for free out of the goodness of his heart.
Well, he has to play James Bond so that he can get other good roles. You know, this is a big franchise. It's gonna be a big break for him.
Yeah, and like.
Now Daniel Craig is cutting our feed. Come on.
Yeah, we've crossed James Bond now. We've really
frustrating that it keeps going on. So last night I was watching, I don't know whether Chris Doe said he might delete it, but him and Beeple had a really, really, really interesting conversation about exposure and stuff like that. So I would recommend watching that if they still got it up.
Interesting.
It was well, a bit, you know, they talked a bit about like other stuff too, but the bit about exposure, and because Beeple did something for Louis Vuitton. He didn't do it for exposure, but he did it for like probably cheaper than they could have paid him or whatever. And yeah, I just thought it was really, really interesting. So if anyone, is more interested to hear more things about that, I definitely think that's quite a spicy conversation about this stuff. So I'd recommend it.
That's right. Yeah. If you want tepid takes, you come to this program. If you want hot takes,
you go to the future.
You go to the future.
We could be spicy. Let's do it. What are we gonna get?
Well, that's true. Know? Let's reach into the old question bag. Maybe we have time for one more. I know you've got.
I think one more. Yeah. Speaking of the future, we need to be cognizant of the present.
That's right.
Oh yeah, but we should do it again because this is really fun. But yeah, let's do one more.
You've got time for one more.
Yeah, okay. I could probably do one or two more.
Okay, let's see if we can find a quick one in here. I don't know, Kyle. Does any of these stand out as a quick one? I kind of want to do Joseph Brady's question about.
I mean, it's pretty subjective, but you've gone that far. You might as well.
That's true. Joseph Brady is asking, where is the best place to learn motion design? I know we're talking a lot about the business here, but part of that is also skills retraining. You have to learn new software. You have to remain current in both the technical and the aesthetic qualities. Hayley, I know that not only do you run your podcast empire, but you're also she's also a designer in her own right. Also keeps her skills sharp. So it is important to remain current on these things. Any recommendations on where people can go and learn of things?
Yes, so there's many places. Probably the first one that comes to everyone's mind is School of Motion.
Right,
They're
the largest,
killing it.
the most popular.
Yeah, also like Motion Design School has some stuff,
Hmm.
and Grayscale Gorilla, of
Libret
course.
Mentor.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other ones. Do you both know Ben Marriott? He's doing some
Yes.
excellent YouTube tutorials that everybody should check out. There's so many other people that I want to mention. I can't remember.
I know there's a lot, and it's hard. It's almost hard to keep to think of all of them when someone asks you, which is great. Like there are so many resources now, and I think what's important is find one that works for you and the way that your life is structured, and commit to doing it.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I know there's a lot of 3D courses, right? If you want to learn, if you're thinking about getting into Cinema 4D this year, you could take 3D boot camp, right? You could go on MoGraph Mentor that. But I'm currently going through 3D for designers from I think it's Devin Co. Yeah, and it's the way just the way her course is structured really lines up with the way I think. It's from a more artistic perspective and a less technical one, which really works for me because I'm much more visual when I learn, so that really helps. It's structured the way I tend to absorb information. Some people are fine to just Google stuff and try it, but one of the things that's kind of necessary, if you want to actively learn a thing, I'm going to recommend that you sort of dedicate time to a thing and you set yourself measurable goals. You got to make those SMART goals, everybody. Let's put on our business ties and let's do some SMART goals. They're going to be something measurable, actionable. The other two, those are our goals. I can never remember what SMART means, Kyle.
It means you just asking what SMART means.
Yeah. What?
It's I should know. We've got a PDF on it. I totally blanked there. I was like, yeah, I know. It's I can't say it. That's why it always puts me off. But it's specific.
Specific. Okay.
Yeah, measurable, attainable, time bound.
And that's SMART.
Is that right?
Well, what's
Did I miss one
missed
out?
an R.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, relevant.
Okay.
I knew I missed one out. Yeah.
So yeah, these things are kind of real business nerd stuff, but it helps. These are systems for a reason. But hey.
Yeah, we've got a free PDF on that on the Motion Hatch website. I think it's with another one, so it's motionhatch.com/perfect day, because it's with a perfect day exercise as well, which helps you to figure out what you want your business to look like in the future and to work back from that to kind of make achievable goals together.
And you're big on goal setting, and we're right at the end of the year, so it's a great time to be thinking about that stuff. Yeah, I know that you have a couple episodes about exactly that, so people should definitely go check those out.
Perfect. Well, hey, I think that brings us to the end of the program. Hayley, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and bearing with us through our bizarre technical problems.
and over again.
Yeah, keep rejoining the show every 2 minutes. I don't know, Kyle, where are we in that 2-minute window?
I didn't check this time.
Oh dear. Well, we've come to the end of the program, so Hayley, why don't you tell people, this is the part of the program where we ask you to plug things. Everyone knows, go to the Motion Hatch website. When is the next mastermind going to open up? Because I think that's in progress right now, right?
It's interesting. So we have one that we just opened, but that's closed, but starting in January. So I'm really excited about that. I'm not sure exactly when we'll be launching the next one for applications, but it's
Yep. I figured that was going to happen.
Well, now we can't know either. We'll get it back on.
Yep.
Okay, plug resumed.
Okay. It should be around April, I think. No, that it starts in April. It will be end of Feb, when you apply.
Okay.
So, but what you can do is, if you're interested, go to motionhatch.com/mastermind. there's like a waiting list that you can sign up for on that page. So that's the best thing to do, because then we'll definitely email you about it. Because I know with social media and stuff, sometimes you don't see the things, and you know, it's really difficult.
Yep.
So I would recommend that people do that for sure.
If you want to get in the door, get on the list. And the other thing that I want to say is that you have that amazing contract bundle that I actually use, even though if you're it's tailored for UK people or for US people. I have a friend who's a contract lawyer, so they help me out with stuff. So I just put it in front of them. But, you know, definitely if you are confused about contracts, if you don't have something in place, I recommend it. It's way cheaper than hiring a solicitor. A thing that most people cannot afford. So it is definitely something I would recommend, you know, even if you won't plug it, I will. So that's, you know, that's the thing. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Hopefully we can have you on again when we figure out our technical woes, you know, in the new year. And yeah, and also big thanks to Kyle. Kyle, thanks for also being on the show with me. Thanks for being,
this has been great.
Thanks for wearing the tie and being supportive and cleaning up for today.
Oh, I never went relaxed. It's the end of the show here, so yeah, time to be relaxed. So, did we officially announce that this is? I think we said this is our season finale. So we're going to be on break for a while.
Yeah,
we're not exactly certain when we're going to come back, but we will. So stay tuned.
We'll be back. You can't keep us out. That's right. No, we'll be back probably in February, I think is our current plan. But it's probably going to be maybe even more of this, more interviews, more guests, more guest spurts, more lasers, more feelings. It'll be fantastic. So yeah, and also thanks to everybody out there. I want to thank all of y'all for joining us in the chat. Thank you everyone for hanging out with us and for being with us and all of your great questions. We have so many more questions than we know what to do with now. You know, they're the gifts that the audience gives to us, and we just want to thank you all for coming out and for being with us and for hanging out for the whole stream. It's so great, and this has been an adventure. You know, I didn't know what people would be into when we started this, and you know, here we are. So I guess we'll say goodbye for now, and I'll just switch it so that it's my face on the screen, and then we can all wave and say a thanks for coming out. Big thanks to Hayley, and we'll see
thanks. Can I just say, if anyone has extra questions, feel free to hit us up on @MotionHatch on Twitter or hit hello@motionhatch.com. I'd be happy to try and like answer anything on there too. And this has been really, really great. So let me know if people watching enjoyed it, and let Evan know and Kyle know too. And yeah, it's been really fun. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Bye for now, everybody.
Bye, everybody.